Hello everyone, my name is Mario Tiozzo and I'm the Data Analysis and Visualization Librarian here at UNB Libraries. Today we're going to take a look at how to analyze the data in this spreadsheet to create various data visualizations. Once again, we will be using a modified version of the PISA 2022 data for Hong Kong. For our first example, we will be creating a histogram which helps us visualize the distribution of a dataset. To help us do that, let's use the math score data series in column N. Go to the top of the data series, Control-Shift down to get all the data series, Control-C to copy. Let's go to another sheet, Control-V to paste. Great. Now data is already selected, so we can click on the Insert tab and then click on the Statistics icon drop-down menu in the Insert ribbon. We can pick the histogram icon, and there's the skeleton of our first data visualization. It's not looking amazing yet, so let's clean it up a little bit and make it more meaningful. First, let's modify a few elements to make this visualization more easily understandable. Let's bring it over here, make it a little bit bigger. Great. Let's start with the x-axis. We can see that the scores are grouped in bins of 20 points. Sometimes you may want this level of granularity, but there may be times when this could prove to be a bit overwhelming for the person trying to understand it. Let's try to modify that somewhat. First, let's right-click anywhere on the x-axis element, go to Format Axis. This will bring up the side pane. We want to be in the axis options, which we already are in. This looks like a little bit of a histogram icon. Here we can see that the bins or groups are segmented automatically into bins of 20. We have the option of changing that number if we choose. So let's say we want to change that for 100, for example. This gives us 7 bins. Or we can change it to force the number of bins. So we go here, number of bins, and for example, instead of 7, let's pick 5. You can see that you lose some of the granularity, but you gain what I call data digestibility. Like I said, sometimes you may need to opt for one over the other depending on what you are trying to achieve and who your audience is and is interested in knowing. Okay, let's move on to the numbers. Because our data series is created with 3 decimal places, this is reflected in the graph. Again, this is a granularity versus digestibility issue, which may change from situation to situation. For this situation, let's opt for more digestibility and display our numbers with 1 decimal place. To do this, let's click on the number drop-down menu, and instead of 3 decimal places, let's put 1 decimal place. Great. This is looking good. I find it much more easily digestible, knowing that we've given up some granularity to get there. You can see that this distribution looks quasi-normal in its shape. Now let's add elements that we want to include in our data viz. If you click on a chart, you'll notice a plus sign right next to it. When you click it, you'll be able to add and delete chart elements. Some versions of Excel, including those running on a Mac, won't see this plus sign. No problem, you can access the same command by left-clicking on a chart. This brings up the Chart Design tab at the very top of the page. Click that. Now click on the very first button on the ribbon, Add Chart Element. From there, you'll be able to add all the elements you require, axis titles, data labels, etc. So let's add axis titles from the Chart Design tab. Just go to Axis Titles. We have primary horizontal, primary vertical. If we want both, we can just go to More Title Options, and both automatically get added. Now let's name those. Number of students, math score bins. Now let's add data labels. Left-click on the chart. Press the plus sign, include data labels. Then we go to more options here and more data label options. Let's change the number to a number. This will include the 1,000 comma separator, and let's remove the decimal places. Great. In fact, let's give the same treatment to the numbers on the y-axis. Right-click on the y-axis, format axis, go to the number, we do the same thing. Number, 0, decimals, great. Let's also alter the chart title. For now, because I'm not sure what we would want to say about this chart, we can put in a generic title, like something like this. Let's bold that. If I had a clearer message to relay to my audience, I might be more proactive with my title and refer to the element or the message I'm trying to convey directly in the title. Both approaches are good, but it depends on what your goals are for the data viz. We're almost there. Let's finish up by cleaning this up a bit and removing any elements that may distract our audience. Let's go to the grid lines, click on any of the grid line. All the grid lines are selected. Let's remove them. Great. Let's also do the same thing for the chart border. So left click on the chart. On the side pane here, we have borders, automatic, and let's go no line. Terrific. That's looking pretty good. This is a good example of a histogram. Let's move on to creating a box plot, also known as a box and whisker plot. A box plot is a data visualization that can show variation within a data set as well as within several data sets. For this example, let's go back to the PISA data and let's select the math, reading, and science scores in columns N, O, and P respectively. I'm at the top of the math data, shift to the right to get all the 3 columns, Control Shift down to get all the data series, Control C to copy, add another tab, and Control V to paste the data. Our data is already selected, so we can click on the Insert tab, and we can click on the Statistics icon drop-down menu in the Insert ribbon. This time, we'll pick the box and whisker icon. And there's a skeleton of our box plot. And over here, let's make this a little bit bigger. Great. Again, it needs some work, so let's clean it up a little bit and make it more meaningful. First, let's modify a few elements to make this visualization more easily understandable. I'm not loving these colors. It makes it difficult to see the data lines in the visualization. So let's soften them up a little bit by changing the colors. Right-click on the element, in this case, the first box plot. Go to Format Data Series. We go to the bucket icon, the Fill drop-down menu, the bucket icon once again. Here we can select from predetermined colors, or we could go to More Colors and include selected more colors in the Standard tab, or go to the Custom tab to get more colors still, or you can enter your RGB code or your hex code if you know them. I'm just going to select a lighter blue here. Great. And while we're on this element, I'll also go to the Data Series option, so the histogram icon here, and I'll click on the inclusive median instead of exclusive median because that's the median calculations that we've done in this course. I'll repeat the process for the other 2 elements. Great. This is looking better, and you can see the lines on the box plot much more clearly. So what does this mean? The horizontal line across the box is the median. The X inside the box is the mean. The top line of the box is the 3rd quartile, and the bottom line of the box is the 1st quartile. The whiskers are the length of 1.5 times the interquartile range. Remember, that's the 3rd quartile minus the 1st quartile. And the dots are the outliers outside of that whisker spread. So we can see, for example, that the math scores have the highest mean and median of the 3 scores. The math scores also have a slightly larger interquartile range, so the box is bigger, which means we would expect the whiskers to also be slightly longer. We also note that the reading scores have the most outlier values, mostly on the bottom end. Now let's add elements that we want to include in our data viz. Left click on our data viz, chart design, add elements. And this time we're only interested in the primary vertical axis title. Student scores. Great. Let's also click on a data viz, plus sign. Let's add a legend. We want the legend to be at the bottom here. Great. Notice that the legend text is identical to our headers for our data. So let's make this a little bit more meaningful. Instead of read, let's put reading. Instead of let's science. Great. That'll be easier to understand for our readers. Let's repeat what we did for the histogram and remove the decimals in the y-axis. Right-click the y-axis, format axis, go to numbers, and let's remove all the decimals here. Great. And let's include the 1000 separator. Great. Let's also alter the chart title. Again, in this instance, I will choose a generic title. And let's bold it. We're almost there. Let's finish up by cleaning it up a little bit and removing any elements that we find distracting. So let's remove the grid lines, just like we did in the previous one. Click on any of the grid lines. You'll see that they're all highlighted. Press the delete button. Let's remove the chart border, going to no lines. And then let's also remove the tag on the x-axis. Clicking on that. That's looking pretty good. This is a good example of a box plot. Let's move on to the next data visualization, the column chart. Most people usually say the bar chart, although that's technically only when the bars are horizontal. When the bars are vertical, we call that a column chart, but I, like most people, say bar chart for both these instances. A column chart or bar chart typically helps us visualize summary statistics, things like counts, means, and alike. Although they look similar, they are not histograms like we saw earlier, as histograms show us the distribution of a data series. For this example, I've used the gendered PISA dataset that can be found in column T. You'll note that I also did some quick analysis to count how many ones for female and twos for male are in the data series using the COUNTIF formula that we saw in an earlier video. Now that we have our working dataset, we can highlight it, then click on the Insert tab. We can click on the bar column chart icon drop-down menu, and we'll select the first instance, the 2D column chart. There's the skeleton of our column chart. I'll bring it up here, make this a little bit bigger. Great. Again, it needs some work, so let's clean it up a little bit and make it more meaningful. First, let's modify elements that make this visualization more correct. The first flagrant error here is that the y-axis of the column chart starts at 2,700. I'm not sure why this is happening, but this is a no-no. Bar charts and column charts need to start at 0 because doing otherwise misrepresents the data. You can see that the visual gap between male and female looks relatively large here. When we fix it, you will see that this is no longer the case. We do this by right-clicking on the axis, format axis, and instead of the minimum bound being what it is, we bring it down to 0. You can see that the difference between the two genders is now significantly less pronounced. Now let's add elements that we want to include in our data viz. Let's start with data labels, press the plus sign, go to data labels. Let's also alter the chart title. Again, in this instance, I chose a generic title, bold that. Let's also make the bars a little bit more prominent. So click on the bars. Let's reduce the gap width to 50%. We're almost there. Let's finish up by cleaning this up a little bit and removing any elements that may distract our audience. Let's remove the grid lines. Chart border. This is a bit more controversial, but I take a more minimalist approach to my data visualizations. I like to delete most elements that are redundant, and since the data is now embedded in the data labels, I will discard the y-axis element. That's looking pretty good. This is a good example of a column chart. Our last data visualization is a line chart. A line chart is typically used to show changes over time or to create a link between similar data points. We don't really have a data time series in our PISA dataset, so I obtained the mean Hong Kong reading scores over the past several PISA datasets. Note that I've modified my year data to be in the date format. If I don't do that, Excel will think that this is also a data line and will create two line charts. Now there are workarounds to fix this, but in this case, I've circumvented the issue by transforming my year data in a date format. So given that we have our data already formatted the way we want it, let's highlight the dataset. We can now click on the Insert tab, and we click on the Line and Area Chart icon drop-down menu in the Insert ribbon. We will pick the fourth option, Lines with Markers, and there's a skeleton of our line chart. And let's make this a little bit bigger. Again, it needs some work, so let's clean it up a little bit and make it more meaningful. First, let's modify our axis in order to make it easier for our viewers to consume the data. Let's click anywhere on a y-axis, press Format Axis. This brings up the right pane where we can modify the bounds. There's a lot of dead space before 500, so let's set our minimum at 490 and our units at 20. This is the jump that the axis numbers will take. Let's also modify the x-axis by right-clicking on any of the elements, pressing Format Axis. Let's make the units jump by 3 years, as this is how many years apart most PISA tests occur. Now let's add elements that we want to include. Let's click on the plus sign. Let's include axis titles, mean score, and time in years. Let's also add data labels, same process, plus sign, data labels. Great. Finally, let's alter the chart title. Again, we could choose a generic title like Mean Hong Kong Reading Scores from 2000 to 2022, but in this instance, let's try to have a more meaningful title. Something like this. This provides more information to the reader and highlights a point you are trying to make with your data visualization. Let's bold this. We haven't done this in previous visualizations, but it's always a good idea to attribute the source of the data, whether that's in writing, in your surrounding text, or directly in the visualization itself. To do the latter, simply create a text box and format it. So click on the chart, go to the Insert tab, go to the text box. Let's put it right here. Let's include some text. Don't worry, we'll fix the formatting in a second. Here we'll align to the right and to the bottom, and we'll diminish the font size. Great. If the chart needs to be reduced a little bit to accommodate a new item, that's easy enough to do. Just click on the inner chart and drag it to accommodate the new item. Terrific. We're almost there. Let's finish up by cleaning this up a little bit and removing any elements that may distract our audience. You know the drill now. Let's remove the grid lines and the outside border. That's looking pretty good. This is a good example of a line chart. Okay, that should be good for now. We've learned different ways to visualize our data, from histograms to illustrate data distributions, to box plots to show us data variation within and between data series, to column charts to visualize summary statistics, and line charts to show changes over time. I hope that this was helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.